On October 2nd, 2023, a woman was crossing Market Street in downtown San Francisco when a hit-and-run driver slammed into her, launching her body into the adjacent lane. She landed directly in the path of a Cruise robotaxi. The driverless car ran her over. Then it stopped, and for a moment, it seemed like the worst was over. But here's where it gets dark. The car's sensors failed to detect there was a human being underneath it, so the robotaxi did what it was programmed to do. It tried to pull over the side of the road. With the woman still trapped beneath it, it dragged her 20 feet at 7 miles per hour before finally stopping. Firefighters had to use the jaws of life to free her. And what Cruise did next would trigger a federal criminal investigation, force out the CEO, and ultimately destroy a company that GM had spent over $12 billion trying to build. Because Cruise didn't just have a technology problem, they had a cover-up. To understand how we got here, we need to go back to 2016. Kyle Vogt was a serial entrepreneur who already made a fortune. He co-founded Justin.tv, which became Twitch, which Amazon bought for $1 billion. The guy knew how to build things. In 2013, he started Cruise in his garage with a simple idea: retrofit regular cars with self-driving tech. By 2016, General Motors came knocking with the $581 million in cash and stock. And this is where GM CEO Mary Barra enters the picture. Barra had a vision. She didn't want GM to just be another car company. She wanted to transform it into a tech giant, and Cruise is going to be the crown jewel. Over the next few years, GM poured money into Cruise like they were trying to fill the Grand Canyon. They brought in investors like Honda, SoftBank, Microsoft, and Walmart. At its peak, Cruise was valued at over $30 billion. Barra started making predictions that sound insane in hindsight. She told investors Cruise would generate $50 billion in annual revenue by 2030. She called robotaxis an $8 trillion market opportunity. By 2023, GM had invested over $10 billion into Cruise. They were operating robotaxis in San Francisco, planning expansions to Phoenix, Austin, Dallas, Houston, and Miami. Everything was going according to plan, until it wasn't. Here's the thing about Cruise that doesn't get talked about enough. The problem didn't start with the pedestrian dragging. That was just the incident that finally broke them. The warning signs were everywhere. In June 2023, one of the robotaxis drove directly into an active mass shooting scene in San Francisco. The car just rolled right through while police and fire were responding. The San Francisco Fire Department reported 39 separate incidents in just the first 6 months of 2023 where Cruise and Waymo robotaxis blocked first responders. The fire chief, Janine Nicholson, went on record saying it is not our job to babysit their vehicles. One incident is particularly disturbing. On August 14, 2023, a Cruise robotaxi blocked an ambulance that was trying to transport a pedestrian who had been hit by a car. The patient had life-threatening injuries. According to the fire department report, we were unable to leave the scene initially due to the Cruise vehicle not moving. That patient later died. Then, just 1 week after California regulators approved Cruise for 24/7 operations, one of their cars drove into a fire truck. The robotaxi had a green light, the fire truck had its sirens blaring and lights flashing, responding to an emergency. Any human driver would have pulled over. The Cruise car drove straight into the intersection. The California DMV forced them to cut their fleet by 50%. But Kyle Vogt was still bullish. In an earnings call, he said San Francisco could handle several thousand of his company's driverless vehicles, potentially 10 times what they had. This is the kind of confidence that builds empires. It's also the kind of confidence that destroys them. So let's go back to October 2nd. After the woman was dragged 20 feet under the robotaxi, federal law required Cruise to report the incident to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They filed a report, but here's what they left out: the dragging. The morning after the crash, Cruise held a video conference with NHTSA. They gave a verbal summary of what happened. They didn't mention the dragging. They tried to show regulators a video of the incident. The video kept freezing due to internet connectivity issues, and when the video wouldn't play properly, Cruise employees just stayed silent. They didn't bother to explain what regulators couldn't see. Their written report that same day, no mention of the dragging. It took 10 days for Cruise to correct the record. Now, you might be thinking, okay, maybe it was just miscommunication, bureaucratic incompetence, things fall through the cracks. But here's what the investigation revealed. GM hired the law firm Quinn Emanuel to conduct an internal review. They interviewed 88 employees and reviewed over 200,000 documents, emails, texts, Slack messages. What they found was damning. By October 3rd, one day after the incident, more than 100 Cruise employees knew about the dragging. That includes senior leadership, legal, government affairs, and the policy team. They all knew, and they said nothing. The Quinn Emanuel report didn't mince words. It described poor leadership, mistakes in judgment, lack of coordination, an us versus them mentality with regulators, and a fundamental misapprehension of Cruise's obligation of accountability and transparency to the government and the public. An us versus them mentality. That's lawyer speak for these people thought they were above the rules. The report called the loss of their permits a proverbial self-inflicted wound. Here's what's wild. The report also found that Cruise was so obsessed with correcting the narrative that the human driver, not the robotaxi, caused the initial collision. They forgot to mention the part where the car dragged a woman 20 feet. It's like a bank robber being so focused on proving they didn't steal the pens that they forgot to mention they emptied the vault. The California DMV suspended Cruise's permits. 3 weeks later, Kyle Vogt resigned. In his email to employees, he wrote, "As CEO, I take responsibility for the situation Cruise is in today. There are no excuses, and there's no sugarcoating what has happened. 9 executives were fired, 900 employees, 24% of the workforce were laid off, and the feds came knocking. Cruise didn't just have California on their back. They were now facing investigations from the Department of Justice, the SEC, the NHTSA, and the California Public Utilities Commission. In November 2024, Cruise admitted to a federal criminal charge. They signed a deferred prosecution agreement acknowledging they filed false reports to influence a federal investigation. The penalty? A $500,000 fine. That might sound like a slap on the wrist for a company backed by GM, but the reputational damage was catastrophic. By December 2024, Mary Barra made a decision that would have been unthinkable 2 years earlier. GM announced they were killing Cruise's robotaxi business entirely. The company that was supposed to generate $50 billion in revenue, the crown jewel of GM's transformation to a tech giant, dead. In February 2025, GM completed the merger, absorbing what was left of Cruise into its main operations. Half the remaining employees were laid off. The CEO, the chief safety officer, the head of HR, the chief government affairs officer, all gone. The final tally, GM spent $12.1 billion on Cruise. They generated less than $500 million in revenue. They piled up over $10 billion in operating losses. And what do they have to show for it? Some engineering talent for their Super Cruise driver assistance system? That's basically it. Mary Barra, who once said robotaxis were the future, now calls them expendable and not our core business model. So what's the lesson here? It's not that robotaxis are impossible. Waymo is still operating. They just raised billions in new funding. They're expanding to Miami and Los Angeles. The lesson is about what happens when a company prioritizes growth over safety, narrative control over transparency, and disruption over responsibility. Cruise wasn't killed by a technology failure. Their car worked well enough to give 250,000 driverless rides. They were killed by a culture failure. When the pedestrian dragging happened, they had a choice. They could have been fully transparent with regulators, taken responsibility, and worked to rebuild trust. Instead, they circled the wagons. They focused on the wrong narrative. They treated regulators like adversaries instead of partners. And when you're asking the public to trust your robots with their lives, that's a fatal mistake. GM is now back to being what it was in 1908, a car company. The $50 billion robotaxi dream is dead. The EV revolution they promised has been scaled back. All those grand visions of trillions in new market opportunities, gone. Meanwhile, hundreds of unused Cruise Origin vehicles, the futuristic robotaxis that were never deployed, sit in stores at GM's Milford Proving Ground, a $12 billion monument to hubris. If you found this breakdown interesting, consider subscribing. I cover stories like this, corporate scandals, business disasters, and the dark sides of industries they don't want you looking too closely. Drop a comment letting me know what you think about the robotaxi industry. Is Waymo next? Is Tesla going to pull this off? I want to hear your takes. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit that button. It helps more than you know. I'll see you in the next one.